Welcome back. With polls showing President Trump's approval hovering at or below 40%, Democrats believe they have a chance to take back the House and maybe the Senate this fall. Of course, what they really want to do is take back the White House 2 years later in 2020. How many of you Republicans out there have had this conversation with your Democratic friends? Okay, you want to beat Trump? Who do you got? Joining us for more is a man who ran for president in 2016, and might he run again in 2020? Former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley, who is in town for tonight's Democratic dinner in Manatee County. Governor, welcome to what we call the trapezoid.
Hey, it's good to be in the trapezoid. Thanks for having me, Alan.
The obvious question is that already there are Democrats lining up to possibly run in 2020. Would that list include you?
Well, look, I might run for president again, but what I'm focused on right now is helping other people. It was a great honor to have run once before. I have probably a better understanding than most people what it takes. But right now what I'm focused on are these 36 state races all over the country and a lot of special elections in between, like the one you all had here with Margaret Good, who won by, finished about probably 15 points better than anybody thought she would do. So that's what I'm putting my time into, and I'll make a decision about whether I run again for president in the fullness of time.
Probably after the midterms?
Yeah, probably.
Okay. When it comes to the midterms, or even how Democrats are looking at 2020, there is a real debate. Obviously the president is having difficulties on all sorts of different levels right now, but so often you get asked the question, what is the Democratic message other than Trump?
Well, look, this is a question that I always ask people when I go into campaign. I pull them as our candidates aside and I say, what are you hearing? What are you saying? And what all of these candidates across the country, even sometimes in some very so-called red states like Oklahoma, where, by the way, Democrats have won 5 of the special elections, is that they learned very, very quickly on their first few doors, never talk about Donald Trump. Talk about opportunity for all. How we make college more affordable, how we make wages go up and not down, how we roll up our sleeves and attack the challenges of rising health care costs instead of attacking each other. And what people are listening for in a way that they weren't listening for it in that year of anger, rage, and retribution that was the last presidential race are those messages of goodness, solidarity, that truth that we're all in this together. And whether we're Democrats, Independents, or Republicans, we have to listen to each other.
But over the last year, you have not really heard that coming out of the Democrats in Washington. I mean,
Washington's a separate matter.
Well, I mean, yeah, but that's where the game is played. That is what it's all about right now in terms of the midterm elections. But from the health care debate to the tax debate to everything that's going on in terms of North Korea, everything else, there's been kind of a silence in terms of a Democratic alternative to the policy prescriptions, whether it's been health care or taxes.
Oh, I don't know. I think I would push back on that a bit. It is true that the Trump presidency is overwhelming. People are exhausted by it. There is a tendency, because of the multiple numbers of stories and scandals and other things, to just see that 24/7. And in the absence of controlling either the House or the Senate, it's easy to conclude that we don't have a message. But Democrats actually very successfully pushed back against the dismantling of Obamacare. Democrats said we should not be sending our country into red ink and making it weaker with these tax cuts for the already wealthy, for big corporations, or in some cases, people that are already dead. So I believe that what you're seeing bubbling up from the party, from all of these individual races, are those kind of kitchen table issues of better schools, improved public safety, improved education, and most importantly of all, making sure when people work hard, they can get ahead. One of the most resonant themes I've heard out there is that our economy is not money, it's people, that we're all in this together. You saw Conor Lamb, that special election that got so much attention in Pittsburgh. I stayed up to watch him that night because I had gone there to campaign for him and was really pulling for him. But when he said, we send people to Congress to attack our problems and not each other, that is what people all across the country are yearning to hear.
Well, let me ask you this. Obviously, the Margaret Good race really was one of a rare big win for Democrats, especially in this part of Florida. Right. You talk to a lot of Republicans around here, and this is a heavily Republican area, and they'll say, look, The economy is doing better than it has been in a long time. The stock market, with the exception of some recent roller coasters, is doing real well. There's more money in our pockets from the tax cuts. President Trump, Russia aside, it's just noise, is doing pretty darn good.
Yeah, I don't know that most people would agree that they're seeing a lot of money from those tax cuts. It is true, though, and it's one of the great ironies of our times, isn't it? That one of the legacies that President Obama left to Donald Trump was the longest string of monthly consecutive job growth that we've ever seen. And it's only been interrupted once, maybe twice, during President Trump's time. And yet, white male suicides in our country have never been higher. There is an anxiety throughout our country still, even though people had their anger heard through their franchise and their vote for president. There's an anxiety that our country's stumbling backwards into the future, that we might be the first generation of Americans not to be able to give our kids a better life than what we've had. There's a third industrial revolution that's happening throughout the globe. America's stumbling backwards into it. We need to turn around and face it and make our kids winners.
Let me ask you this question, because as you mentioned, the Russia investigation, Trump, Comey, all of that is taking so much up in the news these days.
All the oxygen.
Number one, how do you break through that? Do Democrats talk about that? Is it crowding out any possibility of the Democratic message? And I raise that because the Democratic National Committee just today filed a lawsuit alleging collusion and disruption of the 2016 election. Strategically, is that a good idea at a time when the party, as you say, needs to basically get that message, that economic message out there?
Yeah, look, a couple of thoughts to that, to that very large question. All of us as Americans or members of Congress have a responsibility to speak up and push back whenever there is obstruction of justice at the highest levels. This investigation being conducted by Mr. Mueller needs to run its course. There's not much that you or I as citizens can do about that, but members of Congress have a responsibility, and I think that responsibility really is right now to protect the rule of law and allow that investigation to proceed. In the meantime, if I were asked by the Democratic Party, I don't know the ins and outs of that lawsuit, but should anybody from the National Democratic Party ask me my opinion, I would tell them to focus on the things that our candidates are focusing on all around the country and winning. Out of 46 special elections, we've won 39 of them, including one for United States Senate. And what we need to focus on as a party is the truth that we're all in this together. That opportunity for all is the promise that we need to realize for every family in the country. That's what we need to focus on. People are seeing Trump 24/7. They'll draw their own conclusions. But what they want is to win back their own state so their kids can do better.
People are almost, you hear so much about the Democratic wave or the tsunami taking place. Do you take it for granted that in fact is going to happen? Because whether the special elections that you point to, whether it's Margaret Good or Connor Lamb or what happened
in Miami,
right? Those were special elections, local elections which got national attention and national money. In the midterms, it is so spread out there. You have every seat everywhere on the line. Do Democrats in traditionally red areas really have that good of a chance to flip those seats as they did in special elections?
Yes, I believe they do. In fact, I would argue, Alan, that I don't take anything for granted. I was in 22 states last year for 36 different candidates. I continue to campaign and am here today for the party here in Florida. So I don't take anything for granted, but I believe that extended battle line, if you will, 36 states and all those legislative races up, actually inures in our benefit. Because in the one-off special elections, the Democratic Party gets outgunned in terms of big money and spending and all of that sort of stuff. But in a larger map, money doesn't make as much of a difference. So I think if we continue to field the terrific candidates we are up and down the ballot, and look, I used to complain all the time that we had stopped acting like a party, that we didn't care about anything it seemed below the office of president or United States Senate. Well, Donald Trump has changed that for us. We have good people running for state elections, and I think you're going to see a very solid year for Democrats.
We have just a minute left. I'm wondering, given that traditionally the name of the game is in terms of raising money to communicate to voters out there, Donald Trump showed that's not necessarily necessary because he did not raise as much money as Hillary Clinton, but his force of personality and whatever message that he had resonated with voters. Is that a lesson that money may not be in everything in terms of winning campaigns?
Well, timing is so important in all politics, and Donald Trump, with a very, very simple message, made himself that sledgehammer to break the national table of our democracy and let our national politicians know that we're upset, we're angry, and we're worried our kids aren't going to do better than us. But it is a different day now, and what people are looking for is good people in their own states who will make life better for their kids in school, make college more affordable, and strengthen the most important place in our country, which is a family's kitchen table.
Okay, Governor Martin O'Malley, thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you for joining us, and when we return, we'll be joined once again by State Representative Joe Gruters and Morgan Bentley and the events this week in Washington. Stay with us.